Good morning to everybody. Good morning to the audience. Good morning to the panelists. Welcome to the Economic Times Financial Services CEO Dialogue presented by Red Hat. Let me first introduce the panel to you. We have Mr. Rajkiran Rai G. He's the MD and CEO of Union Bank of India. Mr. Rai is an agricultural science graduate and certified member of the Indian Institute of Bankers. He is also the chairman of Union Bank of India UK, Union Asset Management Company, Star Union Dai-ichi Life Insurance Company and UBI Services Limited. He's also a director on the board of Exim Bank and United India Insurance Company Limited. Mr. Rai is also the current chairman of the Indian Banks Association. That's a lot of work for you, Mr. Rai, but I'm sure you will be enjoying your work. Next, Vibha Padalkar, MD and CEO of HDFC Life Insurance. Welcome, Ms. Padalkar. Ms. Padalkar has been associated with HDFC Life since August 2008. She qualified as a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales in 1992. She's also a member of the ICAI in India. Prior to joining HDFC Life, she worked in varied sectors such as global business process management, global FMCG, and also in an international audit firm. Very happy to have you here with us, Ms. Padalkar.
Thank you.
We have Anubrata Biswas, MD and CEO of Airtel Payments Bank. Mr. Biswas has spent 17 years in the banking industry, most of it in senior roles in ICICI Bank. So before joining Airtel Payments Bank, he worked with ICICI as the retail business head for South India. He was also responsible for building the bank's brand in the US and in the Middle East. He also set up ICICI Bank's direct banking business in the UK, among many other responsibilities. Mr. Biswas, delighted to have you on our panel today. Welcome.
Pleasure.
And we also have with us Neeraj Bhatia. Neeraj is the Senior Director Sales of Red Hat India and South Asia. He's an IT and cloud industry expert with over 27 years experience. Neeraj is responsible for driving strategic planning, growth initiatives, digital transformation partnerships, and running Red Hat's industry verticals business. Neeraj is very passionate about helping businesses transform digitally while leveraging the power of open source technologies and innovation. Welcome, Neeraj. Thank you all for giving us time here today. Thank you, Neeraj, Ms. Padalkar, Mr. Rai, Anubrata. And my name is Alokesh. I'm Alokesh Bhattacharya. I'm Senior Editor of the Economic Times, and I will moderate today's discussion. Before we start the panel, I would first like to invite Neeraj of Red Hat to give his opening remarks. Perhaps, Neeraj, you could give us some idea of the trends that you're seeing on the ground, right, based on conversations that you have all the time with different players of the finance industry. Over to you.
Thanks, Anubrata. Good morning and a warm welcome to all my co-panelists. In fact, we are in interesting times. These times when traditional businesses are all looking at technology and transforming themselves, not just to offer incremental services, but just to become a technology company in themselves. I quote a recent study by Harvard Business Review, which talks about a research they did with executives that reported almost 95% increase in importance of digital transformation strategy from within their industry. That is, across the industries, digital transformation has become the center stage of what every company wants to do and invest in. And what could explain this massive shift? Obviously, the pandemic and its impact and outcome for all of us in the times that we are in. The global pandemic has darkly underscored the imperative to use technology as a lever to change how organizations achieve their goals. COVID-19 has put our digital transformation strategies to the test. The widening gap between those who are able to swiftly, successfully respond to the change and those who aren't is validating the value of a digital transformation strategy. The research also quotes that both business continuity and resiliency have far superseded both profitability and productivity as the two most critical factors every CXO, every executive that they surveyed across industry segments was focused on. Clearly, our agenda today will explore these boundaries, and we will hear from our eminent panelists as to how they are addressing these challenges in their businesses. From a Red Hat and a technology standpoint, we see an aggressive shift to hybrid cloud that Red Hat enables, and which builds an operating model for the enterprise IT. Clearly, the world around us is changing. We must change and transform as quickly and as swiftly as possible to retain our competitive advantage and continue to grow. With that, we look forward to hearing your opinions and thoughts during this session. And back over to you, Alokesh.
Thank you very much, Neeraj. Your talk reminds me of a very interesting joke that I think all of us have seen. A joke that where a company is asked, who is the driver of digital transformation in your organization? Is it the CIO? Is it the CTO? Or is it COVID-19? And invariably the answer is COVID-19, right? Because COVID-19 has really made digital transformation, the real thing that we are talking about, even at board meetings and all. Which was not the case so much earlier. So we will start. And given that, the context of this whole conversation is around how digital is changing business models, it's a very, very exciting time for financial services businesses, whether you're a bank, an insurance company, you're a fintech company, whether you're a small finance bank or you're a payments bank. It's absolutely very, very exciting. So many things are happening. The cryptocurrency players were coming in, a lot of controversy around cryptocurrencies these days. Digital currencies are the new thing that are happening. China has rolled it out. India is thinking of rolling it out very soon, right? So, and the startups are doing phenomenally well. Who would have imagined that a startup would become India's largest stockbroker in almost no time, right? So that's how the things are changing. Some of the world's most valuable companies are all technology companies these days. You look at the list 30 years ago, it was completely different. It was all old economy companies. 30 years from now, what's going to happen? What is the Indian top 100 going to look like? Might look quite different from what it is today, given that some of these startups, some of these fintech players might become really, really big. Who knows? Airtel Payments Bank, with some regulatory changes and all, you might become bigger than SBI, right? In terms of how many businesses you do. There are lots of interesting stats going around. Let me then start with the pandemic, and I'll start with Mr. Rai, and I'll come to all the panelists with the same question. What are the lessons from the pandemic, and how has it really changed the way you do business, right? Did you feel at any point that digital native startups have an advantage over you during this period of 15 months? Mr. Rai.
Yeah, good morning and thank you. COVID has taught us many lessons, right from, how to manage health to how to run businesses. So I think it is like a real shift in thinking. And as you rightly said, I think the era will be divided between pre-COVID and post-COVID. So that's how we need to look at it. Yes, there are a lot of learnings. So when it comes to the banking, actually, the technology transformation in banking has started long back. And only thing is COVID is quickening the process. So it is not that because of COVID, we are looking at new technology, but the technology transformation is happening. I think the real technology transformation in banking started around 91 with the big private banks coming in with the new technologies and the public sector trying to do the catch up actually. So like it was more of a catch up, and we started with the core banking and transformation around that. And I think the next big revolution we are seeing now, actually it is till now it was more of digitizing the processes, like it is not the new products that we will be looked at, but we were looking at digitizing and computerizing the existing processes. Otherwise balance sheet will look the same, product will look the same. Now I think that transformation is happening, and COVID is quickening that process. And all fintech players, as you rightly said, they are also bringing in that changes which is required in the ecosystem. So now the changes, what is going to happen is around, data, the data protection laws, how the regulator is going to permit the use of data, and what are the units which will be allowed to use the data, and what will be the protection around built around that. So like there are concepts like account aggregators coming and all that. For any massive change, the way we do banking, I think this kind of ecosystem need to be built. So till then, it will be all superficial changes, maybe trying to improve on the existing processes. So I think it will take some time, but then this transformation will happen. Now, when it comes to particularly the banking, there are some banks which are leaders, and there are banks which are already in the process of reaching some maturity in these innovations. So there are different levels as of now. But 2 to 3 years down the line, what I see is like we also have a Vision 2025 document where we say at least 50% of our retail assets and 50% of our retail liabilities will be onboarded through the digital platforms. So we need to build our system around that. That is what we foresee, because more and more people are becoming tech savvy. They are comfortable using technology. Like COVID has expedited that. Like how many of us were ordering our grocery online? But today, every one of us do. So I think this is what COVID taught us. And with that came creating a wallet and for the payments, and then the card usage. So, and then the UPI, the number of usage in UPI. All these indicate that more and more people are using technology and they are becoming more comfortable. And banks have to adapt to these changes quickly. And you rightly said it, that in next 2 to 3 years, the fellows who are not able to catch up, they will be lost, because the customer will move to the more comfortable platforms where he feels the ease of doing his transactions. So this is my feeling, and I'll add as others contribute to this point.
Sure thing. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Rai. Ms. Padalkar, basically, if we look at it, HDFC Life is, of course, less of a legacy organization compared to some of our older banks, including Union Bank, which started probably 30 years before you did, right? Yet, starting in the year 2000 and starting in the year 2020 or 18 or 17, like Airtel Payments Bank did, is different, right? So what did you face during this pandemic? Insurance was very much in the news and very much visible all around us, right? Did it change the way you do business in any way? And did you feel that you were falling behind the startups in insurance who are not there now?
It was a mix of both, wherein we were very much, in terms of mindset, a wannabe insurtech or a tech with insurer, insurtech, fintech kind of a combination. So a lot of work was happening and moving towards a lot of our processes digital native. One telling factor was that we were already live on cloud even before COVID hit. So a lot of investment into how we can reimagine a lot of our journeys, a lot of our offerings, customer behavior was very much core to how we look at processes. At the same time, I think we need to recognize that there are several Indias. To say that everybody will move towards this is perhaps also somewhat ahead of time. Maybe eventually a lot of that will happen. But we have to coexist with the old, new, somewhere in between, and so on. And especially with life insurance, one has to differentiate between buying groceries versus buying maybe general insurance, which again might be an annual product, and at worst you switch insurers if you don't like the experience, as against having an outlay of 80,000 rupees every year, between that to 2 lakh rupees every year for the next 15 years, and which is quite a sizable portion of one's savings. So people do like still the final mile of an advisory role, even in the so-called new age ecosystem. And that's where, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. You either a human nudge or a human help in honing down, between several options available to a couple of options. What COVID has certainly done is to push a lot more people, the hesitant people over. We certainly had the tools. So we had tools. The way we look at our offerings is into a few parts. So one is the new business onboarding. Second part is the simplification of the journey. Third part is in terms of service simplification. After he or she has become your customer. Then we look at ecosystems and platforms, the way you have a lot of them abroad, whether it's in retirement space, health space, wherein you're creating an ecosystem of people who come searching because they're worried about something or they're curious about something. And then finally in risk management, in terms of how can I have dynamic underwriting, how can I use AI/ML to not have a human look at it, because there are disparate data points that can be put together, and human can look at just the more complex cases. So these are the 5 or 6 buckets that we have been looking at, and happy to say that very confidently today we have the tools that are there for each one of these different parts of our offerings. It's really whether the distributor as well as the end customer is willing to use them, is comfortable to use them, and therein we are nudging them up that curve to handhold them, which is how banks have also moved to say, okay, this time I will help you out, but you know what, you can do this self-serve yourself at a time and at a place that works for you, and so on. So this is very core now to how we think, rather than it being gratuitous or periphery or as an add-on.
Right, indeed, and happy to know that you think this is going to work, because these days what happens, you see a Virat Kohli dancing to the tune of Digit, right? And that's a general insurance company. You're watching cricket, and suddenly you see the cricket captain coming, and it's a most unusual ad for an insurance company, right? And then he starts saying, okay, so Digit is a general insurance company, blah 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 blah. So it's so attractive to the new generation, no?
Yeah, and that's where it needs to now start translating.
Yeah, of course. And Mr. Viswas, Ms. Padakar also spoke about many Indias, and payments banks is one of those entities created by RBI to serve the other part of India, right? And so your experience would be largely different from what an HDFC or a Union Bank of India would have faced, because you're serving a completely different set of people, and a set of people that has faced a huge amount of trouble, especially in the second wave, right? Even in the first wave when the migration happened, right? So tell us a little bit about your experiences and how you dealt with those, and did it change the way you do business now?
So let me answer this question by building on what was spoken by my esteemed colleagues and highlighting 2-3 big differences. The first difference is that we are new. The organizations which spoke before are relatively more mature and therefore have more use cases and therefore have a very different journey in terms of digital, the way we are speaking about in today's topic. The second big difference, and I must underline this, Alokesh, at least in the last 12 months, is the fact that our services model is a distributed services model. It is not a hub model where there is a branch or where there is a service center physically where consumers will come and navigate. COVID, and especially post-COVID, and precisely we can speak month on month, post-COVID we tend to see 20 to 25% lift in business because of the value of the distributed services model. When I say distributed services model, these are broadly 2. One is that you offer banking through an app, which is on the phone. And the second is you offer basic transactions through a very wide network of business correspondents. Both, incidentally, are very close to a human being or close to an Indian. Now, let me talk a little bit about our experiences in each of these segments. Today, we are running India's largest banking network. It's roughly 330,000 monthly active business correspondents. 1 in 6 villages are banked by us. This obviously accelerated post-COVID simply because of the fact that it was very, very difficult for a villager to travel 11 kilometers to a bank branch to withdraw his government subsidies or direct benefit transfers. Equally, we are the fastest growing digital brand in the country. We are processing close to 250 million transactions annualized every month. And this is all happening through the app or through our distribution transactions every month. Yeah. So if you look at it, the platform is of scale, but the platform is distributed without much of what I call the central hub, which is fundamentally the pivot of banking in India.
Correct.
What does this mean for the technology stack? Firstly, Mr. Rai touched upon the fact that core banking and the fact that core banking evolved from 1991 onwards needs to be rethought of. You can't have a system where you're processing 250 million transactions a month, touch a core banking software and deliver transactions per second at a reliable and responsive speed. So you really need to reimagine your middleware stack. You really need to reimagine how you're going to process transactions and how you're going to serve. That has significant implications on culture. you need to think about how you're building the organization technology first, what methodology you follow for development, whether the technology team you're going to deploy will be your own people or whether you're going to outsource to a managed services partner. And all these are consequent waterfalls of the core consumer insight that after COVID, people want something close to their home or in their pocket. Let me underline the staggering implications of this. Ms. Padalkar talked about how people are accessing digital services more today. I would suggest that the opportunity is simply massive. There are 380 million people using their smartphone for digital content, but 180 million of them only use digital financial services monthly, which means there are 200 million people out there consuming content on their smartphones, but not using it for digital financial services. That's the real
Very
opportunity
interesting.
of Indian banks and Indian fintech players. And frankly, in our view, of course, Airtel has a real right to provide a proposition to consumers simply because of its technology and consumer access. But equally, there should be 5, 6 very large players competing on the digital space and ensuring that India comes up the digital curve.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff. Thank you. In fact, that brings me to Neeraj because we are talking really very, very interesting insights on technology here. Neeraj and Mr. Rai also spoke about the importance of data and the data protection act that's in the works. So tell us a little bit about your perspective on the technology aspect in the financial services, and how can 300 and how many you said 380 million, right, who are accessing digital content.
That's right. That's the number of smartphones in the country, roughly, Alokesh.
Yeah, that's the number of smartphones, and of which more than 50% are not accessing digital financial services, right? So how can that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, just to build on what build for Neeraj.
Yeah, but it's a very interesting thing for me because what happens is that if I have a smartphone, I'm accessing Netflix, but I'm not accessing, my bank on the phone, which is very strange.
Insights around that, Alokesh, which we could discuss and dive through. But just I don't want to steal Neeraj's thunder, but like I'll give you one stat which is staggering. Before the pandemic, this number was 150 million people consuming digital financial services.
Okay.
After the pandemic, it is 180 million. So the net movement has only been like 20.
Yeah, that's not much. Well, Neeraj, you don't need any, people really don't need any more stimulant than the COVID-19 where you're sitting at home and with no access to anything apart from the internet to get into digital financial services. So what else is needed? What more levers are there?
There are two aspects to what we have to we bring to the table, and where I think there is the next impact sitting. One is the culture. Culture within our organizations, the way we engage with our employees, the way we engage with our customers, the way we engage with our partners, the ecosystem that supports our business or participates in our business. All of that has suddenly gone from being in person and over time to right now here, and it's all become virtual, right? And not just the interaction, but also how our partners are delivering services for us to put together an offering for our customers, and how we are pulling in feedback from our customers, giving it to our cooking team, which is looking at what's next, what sort of problems do our customers have, and quickly being able to transform our environment or our platform to enable our customers to use it. Right? It's like a continuum that's going back and forth. It's and as Ms. Padalkar said, it's not one India. There are multiple Indias sitting here, right? And all of them cannot be brought to the same platform or the same level of usability and understanding at the same time. Right, so there will be eras, there will be technology, buckets that will lie around, and they will need to be connected. That's where technologies like what we bring to the table around automation, around APIs, and around connecting different disparate systems together through hybrid cloud and making them available, every time will come to bear. Also, is important is that we said the pandemic has. The pandemic is not the reason for the transformation. The transformation, as Mr. Rai said, was already underway. The pandemic has just made everybody realize that it needs to be done with utmost urgency right now, You need to be able to make sure that your existing customer base is first addressed and their services are maintained through the pandemic. And then you need to start thinking what more and how do you get businesses, how do you grow your business? How do you collaborate? How do you engage better? We speak about insurance. Insurance is for sure, for a lot of us, the millennials, insurance is something they want to buy it on the mobile. But a lot of the traditional people, they want to talk to an advisor, understand what will happen. If something goes wrong, how will I put my claim? How much time it will take? They are not comfortable, doing it on the mobile. As Mr. Biswas said, the jump is only what 15 to 20% post pandemic on mobile. People using financial services on mobile. So I think it's a journey. It started. It's brought the right kind of torchlights or importance to digital transformation, and as I said, it's culture. One is very critical piece. The other one is technology, right? Do we have the technology? Does that mean that we throw what we have and we kind of restart with a new set of technology? From a Red Hat and open source standpoint, no. Open source and Red Hat bring you the ability to use what you have and start to pair it with the new, so that you don't have to kind of discard anything that you have. You build on it and you continue to grow from there. So I think when we look at way forward and where we are headed, we have to look at in both these areas. How do we address the cultural part of the digital transformation, and how do we make sure that technology that we have can coexist with the future and today and future both.
Right, Neeraj. In fact, open source has really opened up, right? With the advent of Android, and that has really kicked it up open. And of course, the Android is on the phones, and even in enterprise systems, open source has really. I remember 15, 20 years ago, when I was reporting on IT systems, Microsoft was dominant everywhere, and open source was clearly struggling at that point. But the picture is quite different now. Yeah. And of course, Neeraj is one of those people that I call the purple people. The person who's in sales and who understands technology so well that he can have a technological debate with the CTO, for an hour comfortably. So thank you, Neeraj, for those insights. And since you spoke about culture, I think that's a very, very important aspect, especially for older organizations, including my own, right, which is the Times of India, which is about 200 years old, right? The culture, the mindset, how do you change that? Even though new people come, but the enterprise processes, the culture, they remain more or less the same, because that is in the DNA of the organization. How do you change that? So I'll come to Ms. Padalkar first on this. How can you learn from the digital native financial organizations to change the culture? Do you really need to relook at your culture and create a different kind of culture? And is it even possible?
I think it's absolutely possible, because employees are also changing. So it's not that your employees are in a time warp and you're trying to get them up to speed. And really what we find is that what we're seeing in India Inc. is what is mirroring within the company and also the customer base. So I don't find that difficult at all. Fortunately, in a way for us, our average age is around 35. So not too difficult in terms of adopting, if that's what you're alluding to, adopting of technology, and being convinced that is the way forward. And we do cull old technology that's no longer relevant, because all of these do add to costs. It's comfortable because people have been used to certain technology, but it also causes confusion in the system, especially for new joiners, as well as the cost that I mentioned. So usually we have a time frame within which we will move to a significantly new technology. I'll give you one example. Instead of having call centers, because call centers were almost non-existent, especially during the wave one, and we moved a lot of our processes to cloud telephony. And cloud telephony is nothing but having a call center in your mobile phone. Yes, there are checks and balances that are required. Yes, there are data security checks and balances required, and so on. But the incremental benefits were phenomenal. So for example, when there were no branch walk-ins, literally, because everything was in a lockdown and people were just not walking into our branches. And we had people sitting there, or even our branch people could not come in. So they were sitting at their homes and being able to pick up excess calls after some level of training. So they were not really call center per se, But at that time, there was a lot of panic calling, similar to a bank situation as to, I need my money. Is my money safe? Markets had tanked in March, just before the close of March 20. So there was an accelerated level of stress apart from COVID stress. So cloud telephony allowed us to do that, and people just took it fish to water. Another aspect is, for example, we have senior citizens who are annuitants walk in, at least earlier, having to walk into our branches to say, hey, I'm alive. And then, to continue for us to pay their annuity premiums. Today, 25% or now of late, almost 30% of those senior citizens are using our liveliness app. So it's called Life Certificate app. And they just have to blink and register it. It is a 10-second video, and they can do this in their homes. So senior citizens are availing of this. Of course, senior citizens, anyone over 60. So today 60, is the new 50, and so on. So again, even at that age, whether it's with help of some younger people in their homes or whatever it is, but the inclination to use it for the sake of convenience is phenomenal at every age.
Absolutely. And 60 is the new 50, 50 is the new 35 is the way that we are thinking these days. But that brings me to banking, because Mr. Rai, it's not only about Union Bank of India, but it's about the whole banking ecosystem, especially the public sector banks and the older banks, right? The issue of culture might be slightly more difficult for banks to handle. So I'd like you to take this topic not just from a Union Bank of India perspective, but as a representative of the older system of banks, because there are so many cooperative banks in India also that people rely on, right? Who are not so high on technology yet, and definitely their average age is not 35, right? So how do you suggest that the banking industry go about changing this mindset, because it is going to take a lot of time? What is the approach?
Yeah, before we touch on that topic, I would like to bring another factor.
Sure.
See, when the COVID came in, the only service industry which was opening the doors and working was banking industry, particularly public sector banks. So we were open throughout the COVID period and serving people. More than 90% of my branches were open. And the kind of risk actually, particularly during the first COVID wave and the whole lockdown was there. And if you go to any street, only shop which is open was a bank. Everyone else was closed. And see, when we talk of change of culture and all that, this is the existing culture of the system, that when a crisis comes, the public sector bankers are there to serve the country. So they were opening, and there was two, you could have seen a lot of videos where young girls, officers with small kids, they come and work in branches. We have taken a lot of precautions, but still coming out of home and working in a branch was too risky at that period. So still we did it. And all the transfer of money which happened through the banking system, including the business correspondence, which our friend spoke about, Mr. Biswas spoke about the business correspondent, and this model which stabilized during this COVID period because we incentivized them. But despite that, see, this is a culture of serving the people. It's a culture of being there when you need them. Sometimes when we talk of technology, we forget about the multiple Indias present within India. Because your close relative is hospitalized, you need money, and you don't have any technology products to pay, and you need cash, and you have to rush into a branch and draw cash. And this is where we come in handy. So I think before we talk of cultural changes, India may need many, many years to change this culture of personal touch banking. So it will continue to be there for some more time, and it will need a decade or more to totally change. That's why we talk more of phygital than only digital. So I think both will coexist at least for a decade. That is something which I thought a perspective I would bring in at this point of time. Yes, culturally we need to change. Now, as Madam rightly said, see, average age in Union Bank is 37. Now, this cannot be different for other public sector banks. Actually, see, sometimes when you look at public sector banks, you have different perceptions. It is like 4 blind people touching an elephant. You go to a branch where there is a connectivity issue, there is a pile of paper, you perceive public sector bank differently. You come to my IT department, you will be awed by what they are doing. You come to my digitization department, my analytics department, you will be awed by what they are doing. So I think public sector has different phases. Everything is parallelly working. And it is not that we are missing on any of the new developments. We are as open on account aggregators and open banking, and we can make sense what Neeraj Bhatia is speaking about, and our people are also working on all those. Actually, it is not that we are not aware
Right,
of
but
this.
Mr. Rai, the culture aspect has more to do with the vast majority of the employees that are there, not they don't probably understand technology as well as you do or the Neeraj does. So how do you get them to
Yeah.
get away from the fear of technology?
No, that's what I'm coming to. Basically, in public sector, that we are not away from technology. That perception, I was trying to tell you that same thing, that we are not away from technology, because sometimes looking at a branch and interacting with few people form that impression that public sector banks are not tech savvy. Yes, there are pockets where we are not very tech savvy because we handle a lot of legacy customers and a lot of legacy banking. But then we are as tech savvy as anyone else. So I think culturally, public sector banks have seen these changes happening. See, today I also deal with 1 crore customers who are on mobile banking. So this is not small, and we add a few lakhs every month so onto the mobile platform. And this is being done by my people at the branch level. We don't have that aggressive marketing strategies. It is only through the branches it happens. So it is not that we are totally away. So I think the cultural changes have already set in. Only thing is it has to be expedited, and I don't think there will be big resistance on technology side. Yes, it was there. If I remember, we had to sign an agreement with the union by giving them 2 increments for computerizing the banking. That was the time. Unions were thinking that computerization will kill employment and there will be loss of employment. And, we had to sign a special agreement with the unions to agree for computerizing the banking. From that era, today you talk to any employee, they are challenging that, like they will quote what HDFC is doing, what Kotak is doing, or any other private bank is doing. And my employees ask us that why we are not able to be at par with them. That is the kind of demand which comes from employees today. So actually, I am trying to give this narrative to you to change that mindset that public sector banks are not tech savvy or culturally have to change. Now that change is already happening. It is already there. Actually, it is only thing is basically the perception which is in the mind of people for looking at some part of the public sector banks and the way it works, because we deal with customers from different backgrounds. Like if you handle the kind of crop loans I handle, any new bank will collapse in one day. That's the volume we handle. And there actually, if you go to a branch, there will be 200 farmers sitting in a branch. That is where you form these perceptions. But then that is the way the banking works. So we have both the worlds with us. So like it takes time for digitize and move. But at the same time, the cultural change is already set in. I don't think it will be a challenge for any public sector bank to transform. I don't think there is any resistance on the technology or innovations to set in.
That's very good to know. In fact, I know some technology heads of public sector banks who are better than many of the private sector people themselves. And we know that a lot of our private sector industries have been built on the expertise of people who have come from the public sector, including oil and many others, right? So that's great to know. And Anubrata, would it be safe to say that you don't have any culture issue in your organization, since it's a young organization? I presume that your average age will be lower than 35 of your employees. And is there really no need for any culture debate?
Culture debate will come from the customer side.
Right.
Because you touched about employees, I answered on the employees side. But then I just would like to say that changes have to happen from the customer side. And that will also mostly come from the safety concerns which customer has. So if you are able to address that, I think that cultural change for the customer also will become more easy.
Right. So, Mr. Biswas.
Yeah, I mean,
your take on this question also.
Staying away from the homily of, yes or no, I would just maybe paint a picture of what has worked for us. And I think underwriting the big success factor in building what we would call a productive culture, which moves fast, is a tone of humility. I think what we really start with is saying we don't really understand what the consumer needs unless we build a prototype and go out and experiment with it. So just to give you a sense, Alokesh, finalizing on our proposition inevitably results in roughly 3 to 4 consumer researches and 4 to 5 working prototypes before we actually say this is a winner.
Right.
So if I were to simplify this, I would say there are 3 big learnings which we have had over the last 3 years. The first is be humble, have no hierarchies at all. Anybody should be able to approach anybody. Second, fail fast, run rapid experiments, come out with rapid prototypes, and figure out what is working and what is not working. And third is be clear about the operating model. Do you want a committed team of your own employees thinking about consumer problems and trying to solve them? Or do you want to write a business requirement document and outsource it to a contracted vendor for development?
Right.
I think thinking about these 3 things in some amount of depth would help, has helped us in our journey. And I'll make it alive with a example of product development. One thing we realized roughly 18 months back is that there's 200 million people who are not using digital. There are 3 or 4 very powerful insights. I will touch upon them, but I'll focus on one. One big insight is that consumers don't use digital because they don't have money in their bank account to begin with. The entire value chain of consumers, especially roughly 350 million people broadly in rural areas, is in cash. So unless you have a vertical approach, the horizontal platform approach of digitization doesn't really work. And that needs a real ecosystem approach, including the government, including banks such as Mr. Ray's Bank and players such as ourselves. It needs concerted effort. I'm very bullish that India has, I would say, the thought processes and maturity to evolve new age platforms, which it has proved over the last 5-6 years, UPI being one of them, Aadhaar being the other. But the other big insight as to why people don't use digital is that 76% of people in tier 1 towns said they are afraid of their accounts being used for digital frauds. So they're actually scared of creating an UPI handle on their bank account because they believe that their account will be hacked.
And I can relate to that with a lot of people I know.
So, we conceptualized a product along with a telecom operator, which in this case, of course, was Airtel, which is a third layer of authentication before a transaction actually hits the bank account, using the user's SIM to flash a message which is accepted or declined before the transaction goes through. This is, Alokesh, actually a world first
I
product.
think I've seen this ad of yours on TV.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wildly successful product. 500,000 people use it every day. It forms a core proposition of a digital banking, where 20 million consumers use our online services monthly, and roughly 400 to 500 accounts are opened every day purely digitally through video KYC, just for this proposition. But what I want to focus on is that this insight needed testing cycles and proposition development over 12 to 18 months, along with, of course, telecom operators, because ultimately it uses a telecom SIM, and for us to do a POC and work with them. And therefore, I cannot stress the culture of humility enough, because frankly, if we believe and we decide that consumers' needs are known by us from day zero, we are building an organization designed to fail.
Correct. How absolutely true. And Neeraj, what brings us to this at this stage is that you are definitely quite familiar with all the digital moves that are being made by, the companies on the panel today and others like them in the industry. But yet there is something different about being a digital native organization, right? With a digital native something like someone like an Airtel Payments Bank is closer to a digital native kind of business model, right? So what stage you think are traditional organizations in their journey towards adopting a digital native business model? Because there are also different aspects, like Mr. Rai said, there are 200 farmers coming to the branch, right? You can't do digital with them. You'll have to handle both sides, right? So where would you think we are in this journey of financial services companies moving towards digital native business models? And is it something that is to be encouraged? Is it something that we really need in this country?
So, I think a very, very good question and a very important fact. My assessment, and from what we see on the technology trends, India is probably in the top 5, if not further up, on digitally aware and on digitization, not just on mobile phones and other things, but also on our economics, right? Whether it is taxation, whether it is banking, whether it is any sort of financial that an individual needs to do. Everything in India is available to be deployed and used and executed on the mobile. You can buy an insurance, you can open an account, you can do a transaction, which is by far, for the scale that we have and for the the plethora of organizations that are in different stages of this digital evolution, I think is a global phenomenon in itself. Now, talking of the traditional banking system and the digitally aware or digitally born banking system or digitally born financial services organizations, the big difference is that the digitally born are starting today. They are starting afresh. They are trying to acquire customer. They are offering a value to their customer, to the existing customer of another institution, which probably the erstwhile bank probably offers, but the customer is not aware of. Union Bank of India, or from an insurance standpoint, HDFC Life, LIC, IndusInd Bank. Many banks are in different stages of this evolution, and we work very closely with them to evaluate how they use their the existing business model and kind of put a wrapper around it of digital transformation to make services that are quick, fast, and consumable by their customers today. Right? Mobile banking, UPI, and the NPCI-based Bharat Bill Pay. All of those are examples of how the traditional and the new age have been able to work together and kind of compress this digital transformation cycle from 5, 6, 10 years to probably under a year, right, and quickly get something out in the market. Clearly, every institution will not do all of these, traverse the whole journey or the path themselves. They will collaborate, they will partner, and they will kind of bring in just the value that they have, rather than trying to evolve everything themselves. As Mr. Rajkiran said, they have customers who are traditional, they have customers who are modern, and if they can kind of partner with a new age solution provider or service provider, which I know your bank, sir, is doing, you are able to quickly offer digital transformation or digitally enabled services to the existing customers. Some of them will quickly run to it and start using it. Some will take time. And when we speak of culture in the paradigm of what we discussed, it's about this whole mindset of how we move together with the customers, with our employees, and create a culture of using digital technologies, not just to say it's in fashion, because it's convenient, because it's innovative, because it's fast, and last but not the least, as we spoke, it is secure. There are obviously issues that we have with security. There are every day a new issue comes out. But on the technology side, Red Hat with its enterprise Linux, Red Hat with its cloud technologies and platforms is always working with customers and partners to make sure that our systems are secure, and they can be put to any kind of test that the society or the bad elements in the society kind of put around it. So I think that will be my view, that there are technologies in every paradigm, there are businesses in every paradigm, but everybody, as the Harvard study said, is looking at how do we come together to kind of create a very digitally aware and digitally available business model that our customers understand and we are able to deliver to and kind of thrive in that.
Right. So thanks, Neeraj. And before I come to Ms. Padalkar, I'd just like to, in the same vein, since we are continuing this conversation in a particular way, Mr. Rai, you like you said, you have customers of different kinds there. So the digital channels, well, they have seen a lot of growth, right, in the last 1 year, 12 months, 15 months. There are also the brick and mortar branches and the partner channels, which are also continuing. So how are you managing this omni-channel experience? And what do you see as the future role of branches in a world that is fast going, very, very digital?
Yeah, the question to me.
Yes.
Yeah. So see, the branches we feel will continue move for some time. See, number of branches in metro areas will substantially come down with more digitization. But your rural semi-urban piece will continue to work with the brick and mortar for at least a decade, and then we need to see how the technology evolves. Can we replace them? Because the business correspondents are really developing, and last 1.5 years we have seen they're able to do more and more functions with the technology support. And the adoption of technology by BCs has been very good, and they are becoming more and more viable now. So with that, actually the pressure on the rural branches is slowly coming down. But then this physical presence will continue to be there. So we may see rationalization of branches in metro and urban areas in the next few years with more technology coming in. But I don't foresee that the branch network will go away that easily, because today, if you look at the public sector space, it is still 60% of the banking in India. So even though we have lost some serious market share in the last 1 decade, but then still like it is there, it is a majority player. And most of the legacy customers, because the strength of public sector bank comes from the legacy side and on the liability side. Actually, today we are able to mobilize funds at the much cheaper cheaper cost compared to any other player in the system. So that is helping us, and actually that will survive for some more time. And as rightly put up, like we need to deal with different kind of customers, and particularly more of legacy customers, because particularly the customers who are in the age group of maybe say 45 plus. See, they are the most profitable customers when you look from the savings account point of view. Because they have more balances in the account, they save more, and many times they are the biggest users of my retail loans. So I know this is the legacy, what you call, and they are a bit scared of moving to digital platforms. That's what I was also mentioning when we spoke of culture. See, culture in the bank, acceptability is very good on the technology side, but from the customer side, and that is what Mr. Bishwa has added on, and I think he comes from a proper study, like his data comes from a proper study, and this is the perception we also had, that customers, particularly in this age group, they are scared. Actually, they have the mobile app, they do it only for checking the balances, but then they don't do transactions there. So because they're scared that, okay, if I use my card or mobile app for making a payment, because somebody may hack, because we see a lot of stories everywhere saying that how the accounts are hacked and the money is transferred. So I think if we are able to give that confidence to the people that it is safe to use, and what UPI has done, some of the, like it is, see, this is one of the example of open banking, what it can do. When you have the technology player coming in, that's what Mr. Bhatia also spoke about. I think this is the greatest example in front of us. So the biggest two players there today, I think take more than 60% market share of UPI payments. So this is the force of technology. And you look at the base, the accounts are mine. See, the customers are mine in the sense the traditional banking system, the accounts are there, and the payment applications are being used of some other fintech player who has built a solid app, and people are able to get confidence that okay, this works, and this is not used for hacking. So people are using more and more of UPI. So like that, if you are able to do that for many other products, then definitely this cultural change among customers also will happen. The product usage also will go up, and I think these alternate channels will really gain, and then I think the banks will start thinking of moving from the physical network to the technology platforms, and the customers will be more comfortable. Till then, because we have more of legacy customers, at least the traditional bankers may not move away from branch banking.
Okay, okay. And, Ms. Padalkar, you have, though not to that degree, but definitely you also have the, equal issue in the sense that you also have the brick and mortar customers as well as the digital savvy customers, right? So the way Mr. Rai spoke about, would you also like to, shed some light on how you are handling the customer experience thing, after the pandemic and keeping the different kinds of customers that you have in mind? Mr. Rai, I think you had a hard stop. You have a meeting at 11 a.m.
11:15. 11:15.
11:15. Okay, that's very good. So you can stay with some more time with us. Wonderful. Ms. Padalkar, your view on this issue?
Yeah. So we have close to 400 branches of our own, and also our partner branches. So let me take the partner branches first. So that is also evolving, wherein it's lesser and accelerated definitely by the pandemic, lesser in terms of a lot of need for physical handholding. On new business, certainly we have a platform called Wise, and that adoption went up astronomically because it's low code. It is not heavy on internet consumption or bandwidth, and you can do pretty much whatever you can do sitting in front of the prospective customer, and it can also be a three-way conversation between our person, the partner's person, as well as the prospective customer.
Right.
So that adoption went up, and what's noteworthy is that even the traditional channels like agency channel or a broker channel today are no longer complaining after wave 2 that they were not able to get out and customer was not willing to meet them because of just embracing this technology, which is very intuitive and easy to operate, can be recorded if the customer also wants to have comfort in terms of no miss sale and so on, or whatever was said during the call. So that is in terms of onboarding. In terms of your question on branches and servicing customers, there too we have seen fairly good sense of adoption. In fact, leapfrogging, wherein if I were to look at the response to what we have as VServe. VServe is a video platform. So as a customer does not have to walk into the branch, we just send a link. No app download is required. It's a video interface, and we'll be talking to a human. That human could be sitting in a central location or does not have to be into much smaller locations, which might be, again, from a cost perspective as well as from a COVID perspective. And also at a time frame, an appointment can be made even outside office hours to be able to connect. This has been, we would expect to perhaps have more than 50% of the current branch interactions moving towards VServe over the next couple of years. That's the kind. And so our branch presence, to Mr. Rao's point, is Mr. Rai's point, is that that is going to go down. It's not going to be eliminated, and there's no reason why we should also eliminate it, because there is also we are a B2C ultimately, and we need to be there in terms of in your face presence, and also my earlier point about various Indias and Bharat and so on.
Okay.
So that will remain, but maybe the size will shrink. Maybe it is alternate days or various other models that will emerge, as long as the customer can be served. So VServe has been picked up very well. Insta is another one wherein this is the power in the hand of our sales teams that are servicing customers, wherein they no longer need to come into the branch for anything. Earlier, they might come in because certain product features the back-end office team would help them out with, because insurance is a long-tail product, significantly complex, lots of features and so on. Today, we have built what is like a Google of HDFC Life, and our backend training team keeps updating with all the features. All that you need to be able to do is type, and even that is not required because now it's on voice. So you just need to be able to speak, and it's in regional languages. So that's also, so they have the entire power in their hands when they're out in their field. Another aspect is that they used to come back to the branches to log in at the end of the day and so on. That's been completely eliminated, wherein again, everything in terms of the STP process, the straight through processing is in their mobile phones. Mobile phones are equipped with geotagging, geosensing, and so on. So we know, almost like an Uberization, that now he's with the customer, he's geotagged in the customer location, and what did he pitch? He has all the tools, again, low bandwidth consumption, and a lot of them are offline tools that can be run in terms of videos, in terms of complete end-to-end KYC and filling in whatever is the digital information that we know. Again, being able to ping Aadhaar and so on, and also being able to do light touch medical underwriting, especially for younger age groups, or for those who need to go for medical tests, to be able to finish that interaction into which medical service center that he needs to go and so on in that one sitting. And like I mentioned, entire thing can be in regional language. And that also, YouTube video consumptions today, the maximum uplift is in regional languages. So we need to also triangulate the way people are consuming various parts of their digital world and simplify the insurance black box, if you like, or something that they were afraid of, to demystify it and to reimagine new journeys. Because the traditional long forms, you can't just put that on digital and say, fill in. It's not going to really work beyond one screen. So how do you also take care of your underwriting requirements, at the same time simplify the journey for the customers is really, and companies that do that very effectively, so tying up both ends, I think we'll be able to use and harness this power of digital.
Fantastic. And Mr. Biswas, what is the customer experience? Because you have it, like I said in the beginning, your customer profile is rather different, right? So what is your customer experience strategy, and has it really changed since the pandemic?
So just to build on what Ms. Patalkar said, there are different Indias. I will simplify it into two for the sake of argument, whereas of course there will be a myriad of them. But, the two large segments I would say are urban digital and rural underbanked, right?
Yeah.
Urban digital strategy is very simple and clear. They can do self-serve transactions. We build a bank which is mobile first, and the journey should be simple enough so that consumer problems don't arise. We deploy a lot of AI ML tools at the back, for example, at our call center, to ensure that we have 100% monitoring of all calls, to ensure that even if a customer does call, we are able to identify errant agents and sort of take them out of the curve, so that you're continually pushing the experience curve up.
Right.
Mental philosophy there. On the rural underbanked, our thought process is a little different. Mr. Rai used the word phygital. And we believe that there needs to be a human interface to upgrade people from just using accounts for cash withdrawals into slightly more evolved transactions, such as saving or depositing money. Therefore, our thought process is that out of our 3 lakh business correspondents across rural India, we identify trusted people in consumer hubs in villages.
Okay.
Typically, it is the wife of a village sarpanch. It is the son of the village retailer. People who are known and trusted. And therefore, our business correspondent model is very different from the rest of the business correspondent model in the country, which is fundamentally a roaming model with a micro ATM facilitating cash withdrawals. That's great because it's revolutionized India and it's made people use their bank account, but they're using it today only for money which has been deposited into their bank account by someone else. They are not using it for the money which they earn. And this can only be bridged by this trusted human interface whom we select very carefully. And therefore, you're seeing that we are splintering our offering into 2 sharp consumer offerings. One is what we would call a mobile first digital bank, which is the fastest growing digital brand in the country. And the second is a trusted human interface driven business correspondent model, which is the world's largest banking network today.
That's a very good combination, and it's a very good answer to the question that I had asked. And what there is also there are some questions from the audience. There's one question that has come for Mr. Rai and Mr. Biswas, and it has come from Siddharth B. He says that payments has fueled the adoption of digital services by consumers. What are your views on RBI's new umbrella entities, right? The NEUE initiative. And what are the new digital services that industry will focus upon in the next 1 to 2 years? I'd also want to have Neeraj answer this after Mr. Rai and Anubrata.
Yeah. See, new umbrella entity is a good concept, because actually See, NPCI has become too dominant in the payment space. I think maybe the thought of RBI is to bring in competition here to alternate, have some alternate to NPCI. That is the thought process behind this. That's what I feel they are trying to push. So anyway, now whenever there is a competition, particularly in the technology space, it is good for the consumer. So NPCI has really revolutionized the payment space. There is no doubt about it. But then there can be much better things which can come. And these new licensing and new entities which are likely to come in, mostly in the private sector space, actually, with the technology partners as partners, I think will further revolutionize this payment space. And actually, we also need to factor in the kind of changes which are happening internationally, particularly on the open banking side, on the data protection side, and the building of account aggregators. So where actually, see, what is happening today is reaching giving the credit to the real needy people. Actually, when we talk of two Indias, one is the right pricing of the loans. Basically, today, what all of us are working with the technology platform to compete to the same customer who is already good, who has a good credit record, and we are trying to offer him more and more services at a better price. But then there is not much work happening on the other layer of the customer who need credit, and they are on informal credit platforms, like basically at a very high cost, and they don't get the right kind of credit at the right time. So the technology has to be built on that. But then most of them have bank accounts today. So when we talk of MSMEs and many other rural semi-urban customers, they fall into these categories. So now actually the new developments which will happen actually will be built around this, actually, so that credit reaches to these people on technology platforms. Because see, to reach them, the operating cost is very high. You see the microfinance institutions, if you see, they are the people who reach out to this customer. But look at some of the NBFCs who are reaching out to this low-end customer. Their operating cost is quite high, because these are all high-touch models. So technology can come in. For that to come in, actually, these kind of players are very much required. Ultimately, it is the payment space, then the data handling space, and ultimately the person who is having a bank account, operating his account for 2 years, if that data, if it is made available to a fintech player, how he will process it, and how another lender can come in and lend to this customer, all these things processes have to be digitized. So this is a long process, but this has to come in, and these are all very welcome changes, because actually internationally there are very good experiences around this. There are models which are built around this. So now I think India is also working on this, and a lot of things are happening from the regulator side also. Now, if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, the kind of concepts they are trying to bring in, and a lot of new developments which are happening, new institutions which are being built, actually they are all leading to that, and we will see these transformations coming. So I think these new entities which are likely to come up in the next 1 to 2 years are the real welcome steps, and it will help to solve the problem which India is facing, that reaching the credit to the people who need it, but who are not presently covered by the traditional banking system. So thank you. I will stop here. I have to exit. And thank you so much for the time. And
thank you, Mr. Rai, for joining us. Absolute pleasure having you with us. I wish you could have stayed till the end. We just have about 10-15 minutes to go, but I understand you have an important meeting.
I have a board meeting. That's why. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you very much.
I'll exit now. And I thank all the panel members. It was a real live discussion. I look forward to meeting you again.
Likewise.
Thank you.
So I will want Anubrata and Neeraj also to answer this question. Meanwhile, Ms. Padalkar, there is a question for you also from the audience, and you could take a look at the Q&A tab and think about the question. It is also from Siddharth, and he has asked a question directly to you. And I'll come to you after, as soon as Neeraj and Anubrata through the NUE query. Anubrata, your views on the NUE initiative.
So, the question had 2 parts. If I summarize correctly, let me answer the first part straight off. NUEs are welcome and good. Now let me answer the second part in a slightly longer and long about fashion. Neeraj mentioned that we would be one of the top 5 countries technologically. I will argue we are, leading the world, particularly because of a technological wave underway over the last 5, 6 years, which can be boiled down to two precise innovations. One is that bank accounts in India are connected real time. And second, every citizen has an electronic identity. What has happened is that progressively on top of these innovations, public goods have been built, which have been consumed by financial institutions and others in a very compatible, competitive fashion. UPI was built on the fact that bank accounts are connected real time. IMPS was built before that. So you have a two-stack model just on that. Aadhaar-enabled payment systems is built on the entire concept that everybody has an electronic identity and is biometrically identifiable. And that is one of the fastest growing payment systems in the country. Now, if you step back, we've solved the problem of real-time payments. So what will NUE do? Our view fundamentally is that NUEs will really innovate on two exclusive axes. One axis is information and the other axis is mode. When I say information, I mean the amount of information which is covered in a payment transaction today for retail payments is adequate, but may not be enough for small business payments and may not be enough for payments which require validation for frauds. So that itself will be a set of use cases which will get built. And the second will be the way payments are consumed. As payments have come close to the mobile phone and you see 5G coming up, you will see the advent of payments in wearables, such as watches or through the SIM, which will enable you to tap and pay, which will enable you to do NFC. And that will be another degree of innovation which will come. And if you put a 2x2 on this, you will see that NUs will start evolving multiple business cases, which will have consumer connect. And therefore the argument that NUs are good and welcome.
You agree with that, Neeraj? You see this as the next stage of the technology evolution in finance?
Oh, yes, very much. Again, the basic premise with which NU is being built is that we want digital payments, that whole framework to explode, right? The government wants to use as much as possible to the digital world rather and go away from the cash, right, or the non-digital world, right? So as Mr. Biswas said, this is what will revolutionize our banking and financial services industry, more critically the payments, simply like in conjunction with what 5G will do to telco, right? And you will see coming together of 5G services and financial institutions. So if you see the applicants for the NUE licenses, many telecom providers are and other data center providers are running towards it. So it's going to be a lot more about regulation. It's going to be a lot more about innovation. Consumer to consumer payment, I could pay directly to another person without going through the long banking system. That transaction needs to be validated. That transaction needs to be secure. That transaction needs to be, insured against fraud. So it will really bring about another balloon of innovations, innovative ideas, processes, regulations that will need to be put in. I think it's a step in a very different direction, and I agree with you, Mr. Biswas. I wanted to say we are the top country, but looking at the knowledge and the experience of the banking industry sitting on the panel, I didn't risk it. I said we are in the top 5. We are really defining. In fact, UPI is something that many advanced economies, including the US, want to understand. Google wants to understand what India has done with UPI. How can they replicate it, innovate it, and put it. Just to name a few. All of this is built on open source technologies, right? This is where innovation is happening by the people. This is being tested by the people. It's not controlled by any organization. Cloud, hybrid cloud, automation, AI, machine language, all of these are kind of the base of it. Right. And just to summarize, I think the most critical piece in this whole new world will be data, about my history of being true to the transactions I committed, my credit score, my credibility as an individual. What all do I do with my financial capabilities? I think mining this data and making use of it in a positive sense to grow business, to be able to be more more controlled in the risk that the financial institutions take. I think that's the new era that's going to start once we get this platform up and running. We are
Right, Neeraj, in my mind,
interesting.
In my mind, what would really be interesting, Neeraj, is if UPI can be implemented globally, right, where I can transfer money from a bank in India to a bank in America, or vice versa, or Myanmar for that matter, for anywhere in the world, right? It should not be that why don't, if that technology is made in India, right, and it's hugely safe, secure, and it's fast, it's effective. You can transfer money from any account to any other account from wallets. Also, needs to be a way to explore how this can be done on a global scale, and how Bank of America can also be connected to State Bank of India and other banks, right? That would be really interesting to see. And Ms. Padalkar, I would definitely not want to pass you up on the question on the NUE. I would like definitely to have your views on it. At the same time, there is a question from the audience for you, which is that what are the top 5 technology imperatives for insurers that will help increase penetration and also bridge the mortality gap? So both views, please.
Not much to add apart from what was said on the NUE. The concept is very good. De-risking is good. The teams have been formed. The die has been cast. I think let's see what each one of those different cohorts do with that opportunity. As regards this interesting question on almost a way forward and crystal ball gazing, I'll take a shot. The way at HDFC Life we are looking at it and very enthused by it. The first one is that how can we personalize? Today is a one size fits all. And by that, I mean, how can we have personalized journey similar to how we consume content, whether it's on OTT or whether it is on any other platform that you're searching for, that is personalized to what you're looking for, personalized to even health journeys, even nudges in terms of better health outcomes, rather than it being static. So that is number one. And again, that the data is the oil, and that's something that Mr. Bhatia also mentioned. Second point is, how do I simplify it for prospective customers as well as for ability to upsell, cross-sell? So how can I use surrogates, not just the financial surrogates, which I think banks and other financial institutions have been doing for some time. We do that too, but more importantly, how can we have surrogates for medical data? And that's where we are working with a lot of exciting new fintechs, even some of them from abroad, wherein you're looking at some of the stumbling blocks today. So people would say, okay, you come and send a technician home and do whatever you want, but I can't do a treadmill test at home. I can't take a chest X-ray at home. But there are proxies for mimicking some of these things. So how do we build use cases there? How do we get reinsurers to agree with some of that, at least on the slightly lower level of sums assured? That can make a very significant breakthrough. And also the adjacent point that was made is, how can we increase more cover? These are some of the headwinds that we face today, but technology will show, for example, through retina scan and diabetic patients. And so we're doing a lot of this, and we are getting to levels of wherein there is a 85% perfect match, but there's still that 15%. So solving for that 15% can make a phenomenal breakthrough. And we don't have to solve for the entire 15, because even today there is a margin of error. So another 10% would be a good place to be in. And I'm very confident that that is just a matter of when and not if. I also had made a point, again, a similar Economic Times forum to the finance minister, wherein today what really stops us is data in terms of medical history. And that's why we price it completely in the blind. And that's a very rudimentary way of pricing it. So how do I, and my earlier point, when somebody can demonstrate better health behavior, and better outcomes, rather than doing static underwriting, how can I incentivize that individual that their premiums will go down, or XYZ, or their cover will go up with better behavior? Fourth point I have is in terms of this entire system, in terms of frauds and early warning indicator. And again, that is linked, connecting a lot of those dots, and we have a data lab set up in Bangalore just to attract talent. And that's something we talked about earlier. They'll never move to Mumbai, for example, but that's fine. They can be there. And we ourselves are a 21-year-old company. We have a wealth of data, and also there's a wealth of data that's available. So triangulating patterns came in very handy in forecasting COVID, for example. And how do we see pockets of risk emerging? And risk also is always one step ahead of the checks that we put in. And that will help us feed back into the customers who are absolutely honest. And the final part is in terms of data security, the entire data privacy issues, because we've talked a lot about digital, but this part of it, I think we maybe it's another session, but very, very topical. People sitting at home, large amounts of customer data. Is it a disaster waiting to happen? And we need to be very cognizant of the fine balance between giving access versus unauthorized access. So these are, I think, 5 buckets in which I would see various digital and tech imperatives.
Thank you very much, Ms. Padalkar. It was really wonderful, very, very deep insights. And there is a question which I think is directed towards Anubrata, but it's not mentioned the name, from Kaushik Mukherjee. He also raised his hand. We were trying to get him on camera, but we failed. There was a technical glitch. So Kaushik says 380 million using smartphones is taken off on your number, right? But what about those who do not have literacy to use smartphones, but have only taken it as a style statement, having money in the pocket or from parents' pocket? How can we make them come into the ecosystem of digital India? I don't know if sounds like a difficult question to answer, but Anubrata, you're short at this.
I think we answered it in part because we were talking about the insights, right, as to what stops a person from using digital financial services. I would say fundamentally the issue is of income levels, cash going into accounts, and therefore value chain digitization. While there are players who have looked at each of the need stacks, be it agriculture, be it the technology around agriculture, be it banking, which gives loans to agriculture, verticals, which really deeply integrate cash flows, is still missing as a big link. To give you an example of dairy, while a lot of dairy is actually digitized today, where money goes straight into the bank account, the money is actually instantly withdrawn and spent by the villager, and then the money is actually ferried back by the person selling the produce into his neighboring village. So that's a fundamental problem which you can't solve unless you have what I call spoke points, which means banking points in each of the villages where it's easy to deposit and withdraw money, and then to potentially upgrade the consumer through this physical interface where there are trusted, human beings who can teach and educate. One insight I want to leave the panel with is this insight of 80-20. We find that out of the entire village community in rural India, 20% of people tend to be very deep users of UPI, and they tend to do transactions for the other 80%. That ratio is exactly the reverse for urban India, especially metros. And I would imagine that in the next 5 years, the ratio will start creeping up towards what urban India is.
Indeed, that would be the day. We look forward to that. And we are almost out of time. It's 11:25. We close at 11:30. So Neeraj, wait your closing remarks. But there is a question also for you that I have, following which you can deliver your closing remarks. Essentially, the entire workforce of financial services, they've gone through significant changes, right? In terms of using collaboration tools, we are doing so many Zoom meetings and Microsoft Teams meetings, events. Every day we have like 6, 7, 10 meetings lined up virtually, working from home remotely. So this now, given the financial services industry's move towards the digital native business model, what do you see is the future of the workforce and employee engagement? How can companies engage with their people better? And then your closing remarks.
Thanks, Alokesh. Another great question. So clearly, we are all thinking and talking about our customers. The first customer that all of us executives have is our own employees, right? Our ability to deliver to their aspirations, to transform their thinking will be critical to how we transform our organizations, and through that, manage our customers better. Right. So clearly, the future of the workforce is going to be, if I steal the word from the technology world, is going to be hybrid. Right. There were days, and there are organizations there, where everybody is required to come into an office and function from there. But I think over the last 12 to 18 months, almost every organization, whether it is public sector or government pure, or it is, a PSU or a private sector, has built sort of a working environment which allows our associates to execute on their day-to-day work from their home or from an office, right? And again, different statements around it, but I believe the pandemic and its impact is going to be there for some time, till we kind of go through multiple rounds of vaccinations or whatever else it takes to get us out. So the workforce will be hybrid. We will come into the office and work from there with necessary precautions. We will require tools for us to simulate our workspace and move it with us, from a physical office to a virtual office, so to say. It will put a lot more pressure on technology once again, and it will give us a lot more critical need to bring security in as a very critical paradigm, not just in the way the financial institutions transact with their customers, but what and how they allow their associates to access, when they move from within an office, which is a secure network, to home, which is probably on their personal Wi-Fi. So I think multiple areas that need to be addressed, and it's a vast subject in itself. Clearly, it's going to be a challenging time out there in balancing, rebalancing, and repurposing, our IT capability to support both the physical and virtual working environments. But as I said, clearly, it's an area of evolution. A lot of work is being done on that area as well. There was a time where there was a virtual working environment created, where you didn't really have to take your data outside. Only the images were being transferred. I think we probably need to go back to some of those fundamentals and revisit and redeploy them in today's environment. So I think that will be my view on it.
Anything else you want to add in terms of your closing remarks, and then we can wrap up the panel?
Yeah, I think a very, very solid and a great discussion. I got a lot of insights and into how different parts of the financial services industry are thinking, how our CEOs are thinking, and how close, to really congratulate everybody, how close they are to technology. Gives me, from being a technology, kind of a representative of a technology company, a lot of positive hope and a good vibe that technology is so close to our CEOs. And in closing, I will go back and refer to the Harvard research that I spoke about. They also say that as organizations continue and focus on challenges and opportunities associated with the 3 pillars of transformation, which is basically culture, business processes, and technology. The question is basically not how they will get back to the old ways of working. Clearly, the issue is how organizations can take what they've learned and put together the right combination of improvements for the future, right? Because it is something that is evolving and will continue to evolve with the backdrop of this pandemic, and other challenges that are we all know are sitting right outside the boundaries of this pandemic, or just next to the next wave, or not just of health related matters, but also of how fraud is being brought in, how risk is being viewed. So I think it's about the continuous improvement. It's about how we are able to look at the future and plan for where we are going rather than where we are today. So with that, thanks to the eminent panelists for sharing their thoughts and ideas today. And it was really a intriguing and very enlightening discussion.
Thank you, Neeraj. And in fact, you hit the nail when you said that, CEOs today understand technology so much better. As a journalist, I can vouch for that. Also, because I have been talking to CEOs forever, and then I think the view of talking to a CEO about technology has changed so much from 2 years ago, when if I were to have this panel 3 years ago and say we are going to talk about digital native business models, I did not get a single confirmation to come and to chat with me. but it has changed dramatically. In every conversation that I have, digital is, every CEO conversation that I have, and we've done several, digital technologies definitely dominates the conversation like it has never done before. Thank you so much, Ms. Pradalkar. Thank you, Mr. Viswas. Thank you, Neeraj, for coming and chatting with us. Thank you also to Mr. Rai for being here with us almost the full time. Thank you to all the audience members who have joined us and listened to us so patiently. And a big thanks from the Economic Times to Red Hat for allowing us this opportunity. Thank you very, very much. We'll be in touch.